Let's talk about Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. That's right. No more excuses. Get your lazy ass off the couch. Go start a podcast. There's the creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Once again, no more excuses. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Couldn't be easier. Even better, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. That's right, they're paying us for this ad. Thank you very much, Anchor. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started now.
This is The Dime, a 10-minute dive into the cannabis and hemp industry through trends, insights, predictions, and tangents.
What's up, guys? This is The Dime. This week, we are breaking down Cannabis Mythbusters 2 quality control style. This is the podcast that gives you the blended perspective of the business and science. As always, I'm joined by Kellan, and this week we have the fortunate time of Evan Friedmann. Evan, you want to give a little background on yourself?
Hi, Bryan. Great to be here. So I'm Evan Friedmann. I am Vice President of Hellma USA, and we are involved in the optical analysis industry. So we use light to measure the chemical aspects of laboratory samples and process manufacturing in industries stretching from pharma to petrochemical, food and beverage, agriculture, and cannabis.
Awesome. Let's get into the topic. Like every consumable product, one would assume that cannabis, along with its derivative products, needs to be vigorously tested, not only to ensure that the product is safe and free of contamination, but also to inform the buyer of the contents of the product they are about to consume. With the addition of 5 newly legalized states into the market, once again, cannabis experts are looking for standardization to improve product safety, consistency, and predictability. With that being said, Evan, what is one misconception consumers have about the cannabis quality control industry?
Well, I think one misconception is that quality is based entirely on THC content. And the more THC there is, the higher quality it is. I think that is a general perception amongst the wide consumer base out there. And I'm not really sure how accurate that is. In the last several years, there's been a lot of research into what's been dubbed the entourage effect, or the interplay between not just THC, but all the cannabinoids, as well as the various terpenes, of which over 100 different terpenes have been identified in cannabis plants, and even the flavonoids and some of the lesser compounds that we don't even talk about could be influencing the overall experience and medicinal effects that an individual gets from a plant. So labeling it with just the THC value isn't really useful for the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably the biggest misconception is, as it relates to labeling and quality control, is that there is a robust quality control system implemented in these cannabis companies. And I just don't think that's the case yet. A lot of these companies aren't even required to follow normal CGMP practices that other food industries and nutraceutical industries that are federally legal have to follow, right, in order to manufacture a consumable product for the general population. And so you kind of have this patchwork of companies throughout every different state that some are following it to a T, some are kind of cutting some corners where they can to save costs, and it creates a large spectrum of different products that hit the market. And I mean, it's pretty relevant. There's been a ton of different studies that people have gone out and even CBD, right? You can go purchase 10, 15 different products of CBD and look at the labels, and they say one thing. And then when they get them into the labs and start doing the testing on them, and it's not even close to what the labels are saying. So there's some really good articles out there that kind of are studies, if you will, that highlight that. And so I think at the end of the day, that is kind of where the industry is, right? It's just the labels. It's 80% of the companies out there, you can't trust the labels.
Does that mean, in your opinion, Kellan, that when you purchase edibles, there's a chance out of the 10 gummies in there, one of them might not be up to the quote-unquote standard of the back of the label?
I think that for the most part, those days are probably behind us in more mature states. You will see that as an issue in kind of some of the emerging states, some of these new states that just came online, if they have operators that are new to the space. But right now, I think that that's kind of behind us. A lot of these states are MSOs now, and they've kind of figured out how to avoid those kind of problems, if you will. What do you think, Evan?
I think you also have to draw a distinction between marijuana and hemp, because the way CBD or hemp cannabinoids are regulated and managed, they're mostly not. And there's a lot more product being produced there and a lot more hands in there, and so there's a lot more opportunity for fraud. I think the marijuana edibles, especially the edibles, they have testing protocols in these established states. I mean, these 5 new markets are yet to be seen, but in these established states, I don't think if you're buying something that's based on an extract, I think you can trust the certificate, the label, a lot more, because of the homogenized nature of the material as opposed to the plant material itself.
Yeah, and I think another good point there is, or another point to make, is that the consequences for not getting the concentrations of cannabinoids right in the THC space is a lot more significant than not getting them right in the CBD. Right? Like, you get one gummy with 10 times as much THC in it, that individual is going to have one heck of a good time, or a good time,
or a bad time, or a bad time.
So let's break that down, Kellan. How do they currently monitor that to make sure that they're within those established potency limits?
That is a good question. I'm not actually 100% sure on how that is achieved through food chemistry applications, but I would imagine it's some sort of they test the mixture in process, and within food chemistry, there's got to be some robust homogenization methods. I'm not familiar with it, honestly. What do you think, Evan? Are you familiar with something like that?
So I am not directly familiar, but based on some experience, I can take an educated guess at what it might look like. You know, making gelatin is done at an elevated temperature, which helps with the viscosity of the extract that's being used to formulate the food chemistry. And then when the temperature is brought down, it sets. So it would strike me that they could probably mix all the gelatin ingredients and the cannabinoids together to make the final blend that they then put into molds and set. And it would be easy enough to take a sample from that homogenized batch.
Yeah, and so that is exactly how they do it. I was talking to Sean about this, right? I just don't know how they test for quality, right? You know what I mean? So like I was talking to my buddy Sean, and we were talking about how Wild does it. Actually, Wild's based in Portland, if you guys were wondering.
Yeah, it's Wild with a Y, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know these guys.
Another company called Sentia, right? So these
two. No free advertising.
It's actually a really interesting case study, if you will. So Wild, they both mix them in huge hoppers, right? All the ingredients go in. They mix it up for like 45 minutes. They take a sample out probably and send that to the lab to make sure it tests at the correct concentration. And then what Wild does is they then have individuals pour it into beakers, and they go pour individual molds, right? Versus Sentia pours it onto a massive skid.
Yeah, right? Sure.
And then the machine just punches them out. pretty wild. But my point is that I don't know where the QA/QC is in that process to make sure that as you're pouring the gelatin mixture
Yeah.
in the lab, like how do you know that it's staying homogenized within that hopper, right? And so I have
Yeah.
no idea what they're doing. And I mean, I think that could be potentially an application where a spectroscopy could be implemented there, right? Maybe put a sensor that could measure those. Is that even possible, Evan?
To be continued.